I love how people logic read things today as if that's how things were back then. That how we respond today, how we act today, how society moves today is the same as how things would move back then. Not understanding the totalitarian states that people lived under back in the day, especially we're talking about during Roman times. Do you even have a concept of how life was during the Roman era? The closest thing you may have to it would be uh, the USSR, depending upon how old you are. If you can remember how the USSR was during communism, or how North Korea is today, with their ability to stifle information, stifle growth, then you might have a concept of how things would have been under the Roman rule during the time frame of this so-called Jesus. But what you're saying makes no sense. And then Stephen, well, we just talked on the live. Stephen was on my live, but couldn't make a credible argument for anything. If I had realized it was you, I would have said something about your statement here. But then we have a live on our YouTube and Facebook channel that we do every day between 10 and 10:30. We start around that time frame, Monday through Friday. And my girl here, Lawrence, I guess it's a lady, I don't know. But they said the idea he's not historical defies logic. Okay. Josephus was within the generation of Jesus. He talks about a group of Jews that followed him. No, he don't. Not in the sense that you're talking about. If you actually read Josephus's work, two things that you should notice. One, Josephus talked about four different Yeshuas with different family members, brothers, different fathers that were under different governors that dealt with different aspects that you will find within your one Jesus story. You see, the four different Jesuses in the Josephus's writings all were combined together to make your one Jesus, but they had different family structures and they had different jobs and they was in different places and they was under different Roman governors. So first go read Josephus before you quote Josephus. And then it has already been proven and debunked that Josephus' confession, him saying that, and then there was a man, if you can call him a man, it has already been proven that that is a forgery that was added to Josephus's work a couple of hundred years after Josephus had already died. Now, understand, Josephus was born after Jesus supposedly had died. So yes, you're right. He was in and around the time frame that people would have been talking about this Jesus if he had lived, but they were talking about different Yeshuas at that time frame, not the one that you believe in that's in your Bible. But those four archetypes were used for your Jesus in the Bible. But he said, so it's ridiculous to think a group of Jews were going around Judea talking about a crucified Messiah, that he didn't exist, would easily be refuted by the Jews living in the same time. Well, here's the thing. The Jews who were living during that same time did refute the fact that this Jesus character was the Messiah, that he did die on a cross and rose up again. They were saying that the story was false. But understand, Vespasian was called in because as the best general of Rome at that time frame, to defeat the Messianic Jewish story because they were causing disruption within the Roman Empire under Nero. It was such a problem that he had to come in and destroy their story, which he had already demonstrated is what he did to get rid of the Druids. He destroyed the Jewish story. After destroying their story, he then could control them. Now, Vespasian comes in, and him and his son Titus go about reconquering Judea and squashing the rebels. He runs into Josephus at the Battle of Galilee. Josephus becomes his slave, his capture, his POW. Then he winds up working for Titus and Vespasian because Vespasian is sent off to Egypt before he goes to Rome to become the new emperor. Mind you, while Vespasian was there, just in case you bring it up, Titus also verified that according to the story, Vespasian spit on some mud and wiped the man in his eye, and the man all of a sudden could see. And then put his foot on his hand, and all of a sudden the man's hand ailment went away. Vespasian did some of the miracles of Jesus, according to Titus. I know you're going to mention Titus probably at the end of this. You're going to mention him. So I just go ahead and throw it out there. But Vespasian also ordered, after he brought Josephus to live in Rome, he also ordered that every copy of the Torah, every copy of the Talmud, every copy of the Septuagint would be burned, except for the one that he kept in his personal vault. That's the only one. So you're looking for things to refute it, but you're not going to get it in the way that you want it because they were under totalitarian state and people were murdered. The reason you find your Dead Sea Scrolls is because of the totalitarian state of the Roman Empire. The reason you find the writings at Nag Hammadi is because of the totalitarian state of the Roman Empire after 381, when Theodosius went about murdering anybody who did not agree with Orthodox Christianity. You have never lived in that time frame, nor have you ever even studied it, obviously, or otherwise you would realize that. But of course not. Of course not. Uh, there's no historical refutation. Okay, we can talk about that. Your logic isn't logical. Your belief is based on no facts whatsoever, and you choose to ignore them. Called cognitive dissonance. And my guy Steven said there's no proof besides literature for Plato, Aristotle, and Julius Caesar, or any other historical figure. I wish this guy would stop and think before he speaks. By the way, practically no one denies Jesus existed. I wish you would think before you write, because there are plenty of scholars who did not go to a Christian organization who admit that there is very little evidence for a historical Jesus, that the way that you prove historicity, Jesus does not qualify. They will admit that other people wrote about a Jesus character or about Christians. Actually, Titus never wrote about a Jesus. He wrote about Christians. What's the other guy? Pliny the Younger wrote about Christians, did not write about a Jesus, but that there were people who were following this new religion. They are writing almost 100 years after supposedly the story happens, because Titus doesn't write this until around 124 CE. Your Jesus supposedly died at 33 CE, so he's not writing it at a time frame where there will be anyone who can prove it, validate it, or anything of the such. But you mentioned Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. If you had only mentioned them, you would have a pretty good and decent level right there, because all that we really do have is literature from those persons. But one thing that's different is that Plato you have the writings of Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates from their students, the ones who was actually studying under them. You do not have that with Jesus. There is not one eyewitness account in the Bible that is of someone who was actually with Jesus. These are all anonymously written, and then the church later gave them the name. So none of them are eyewitness accounts, even though y'all like to claim eyewitness account. None of them are actually eyewitness accounts. You're just calling out names that the church back in the day decided would be the names. Now, as far as Julius Caesar, we have actual writings from Julius Caesar that he wrote. We have zero writings that Jesus wrote. It would have made things much simpler. Gospel of Jesus according to Jesus. But you have no writings from Jesus at all. But you have writings from Julius Caesar. You have coins that were minted with Julius Caesar's face on them at the time of Julius Caesar. And as you look at the coins, you can see the aging. Well, he didn't age that much, but you can see a little bit of difference in Julius Caesar. And especially Nero. If you look at the coins printed during the time frame of Nero, you see Nero go from young, skinny Nero to fat Nero. You can see the difference in the time span of it. But there are pots and there are other clay pots and tablets and other things that demonstrate Julius Caesar. The fact that you call everybody became a Caesar after that is based on Julius Caesar, and that he has the family bloodline that continued. You don't have that with Jesus. You don't have that. But at least we have more archaeological evidence of those people than we do of Jesus. All you have is your Bible and belief, and that's not facts. So you have a great day. Remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.